how that impacts Parent Plus borrowers. Oh, thank you for starting the recording. Okay, so with that, we are going to dive in. So quick note before we get started. The chat is open. We're a smaller group today. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will turn to questions at the end. So also feel free to hold questions, see if we answer them, and then we'll have time for Q&A. But yeah, just wanted to flag for folks that you can send comments or questions that you have in the chat. Okay, so the big takeaway for Parent Plus borrowers, and we'll go into what that is, but if you're a Parent Plus borrower and you want to preserve access to income-driven repayment programs or IDR plans that generally give you a lower monthly payment, and you want to preserve access to forgiveness avenues such as income-driven repayment forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness, there is action you need to take and fairly soon by April 1st. We highly recommend exploring consolidating your loans, as that will be the only way to, as a Parent Plus borrower, to maintain eligibility for income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness. We are going to break down what a lot of those elements and those terms mean. So if that felt really overwhelming, if you're like, what is public service loan forgiveness? What is income-driven repayment? How do I know if I'm a Parent Plus borrower? We're going to break all that down. But that's sort of the top level of what we're talking about today. So again, this is only actions you need to take if you are A, a Parent Plus borrower, and B, are a Parent Plus borrower that wants to preserve access to income-driven repayment, or IDR, and public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF. So let's start with what it means to be a Parent Plus borrower. So you might have Parent Plus loans if you borrowed money for a child or a dependent. How would you check this? So if you log into studentaid.gov, and that's just studentaid.gov, if you make payments to your servicer, you will have like the servicer name .studentaid.gov. I suppose you could check potentially your loan type there, but of the screenshot we have on the slide, if you log into studentaid.gov and click on My Loans at the top, you'll scroll down and there will be a sort of broken down list of your loans as listed here. And the loan type should list Parent Plus loans. So that's one way to check. As always, with student loan questions or issues, you can also reach out to your servicer. We want to note if you're experiencing really long hold times or any issues when contacting your servicer, definitely feel free to reach out to us and the Office of the Attorney General. But that's what Parent Plus loans are at a high level and how you can find out if you have Parent Plus loans. What is the status right now today if you're a Parent Plus borrower? So Parent Plus loans are only eligible for a income contingent repayment, or ICR. This is a type of income-driven repayment plan. Only eligible for ICR after consolidation. So if you have Parent Plus loans and you consolidate, you unlock eligibility for ICR, which is a type of income-driven repayment plan. I know there's a lot of acronyms going on today with this webinar, so just like as a aside, so income-driven repayment is repayment plans that tie your payment amount to your income. So these are distinct from a fixed repayment plan. You might have heard something called the standard plan, graduated, extended. All of those are repayment plans that tie the amount you're paying to your overall debt balance. It has nothing to do with your income. The benefit with income-driven repayment plans, or IDR, which you can think of as like, let's think of that as an IDR as the overall umbrella term for all federal student loan repayment plans that tie the amount you pay to your income. These are beneficial because of that link to income. For borrowers, that's going to be cheaper than the amount you would pay under these fixed repayment plans. Another thing I want to say about the acronyms of today. So I mentioned you can think of IDR as an umbrella term for all the income tied plans in the federal student loan space. Income contingent repayment, or ICR, is like underneath that umbrella. It is a type of IDR plan. And so for Parent Plus borrowers, it's really important because this is your avenue to access to income-driven repayment plans right now. If folks have questions about ICR and the elements there, I'm happy to talk through that. But this plan offers forgiveness after 25 years, calculates the amount you pay. I think it's 20% of your income, I believe is the amount. So that's sort of a high-level overview of what ICR is. Okay, that's the income-driven repayment of it all currently. If you're a borrower who has been working in public service, say you work for DC government, the federal government, you work at a nonprofit, you might be pursuing public service loan forgiveness. We'll talk a little bit more about what public service loan forgiveness is. It is a loan forgiveness program administered by the Department of Education. It's written into law. And this provides forgiveness after 120 monthly payments while under a qualifying repayment plan. Generally, qualifying repayment plans mean income-driven repayment, or IDR. So let's what's the phrase? I don't know. Thread the needle. That's what I'm looking for. Let's thread the needle here with all the acronyms that are flying around. So if you're a Parent Plus borrower, ICR is the only avenue currently for accessing a qualifying IDR plan or qualifying repayment plan, which is IDR, under public service loan forgiveness. So if you're someone who wants to access public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment, ICR is the way to do that as a Parent Plus borrower and by consolidating your Parent Plus loans. I hope that made sense. I know that was a lot of acronyms. So why are we hosting this webinar today? So there are some upcoming changes to IDR plans, which remember is that umbrella term for these income-tied plans, that require Parent Plus borrowers who want to preserve IDR options and want to preserve their access to public service loan forgiveness to take action. So we mentioned consolidation before. I want to break down what your major deadlines are. And if you are a Parent Plus borrower who wants to make sure they have a repayment plan that's tied to your income, so access to lower monthly payments, and wants to preserve access to public service loan forgiveness, these are the steps we recommend that you take. I want to take a brief aside here. Let's say you're a Parent Plus borrower whose debt repayment strategy, you've been on the standard plan, and that is your strategy for tackling your debt. You don't need to take these steps if you are not worried about income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness. However, it is important to think about why you might want access to that down the line. Maybe there are other reasons that aren't applicable to you now, but you want to preserve the ability to have lower monthly payments in case you face some sort of economic constraint down the line. These are all reasons to be thinking about taking the steps we're listing here today. So the first thing you want to do is certify your public service loan forgiveness employment as soon as possible. So what this means is that you're going to go to studentaid.gov/PSLF. There's a public service loan forgiveness help tool. And what you need is the EIN of your public service employer or your 501c3, whatever the public service employer is, some sort of email there, and an EIN number, which you can find on your W-2. And you're going to certify from October 2007 to present any public service employment that you have. Maybe your employer closed. Maybe they aren't able to certify your employment. Under those circumstances, reach out to us, but there are other options. So that's going to be your first step. And we'll get into the reason of why we recommend that before consolidating down the line. But so step one is certifying your public service loan forgiveness employment. Then consolidate by April 1st, 2026. I buried the lead here a little bit of what the policy change is. What is happening is that on July 1, 2026, any Parent Plus borrowers will not have access to income-driven repayment. And so it's important that you consolidate and that consolidation loan is dispersed prior to July 1 of this year. Because of processing times the Department of Education has observed, they're recommending folks consolidate 4 to 6 weeks before that deadline. And so they're recommending people consolidate by April 1, which is in a week about. So if you're on this webinar, I highly recommend certify your employment as soon as possible. You can then apply to consolidate after that certification. You can do this online. You never have to pay for consolidation. So, just as a scam flag, if there's a payment element that's concerning, and definitely reach out to us and the OAG about that. You never have to pay. You can do it online for free. The other step I want to flag for people, so you've consolidated. Let's say your loan's dispersed and you have this new direct consolidation loan. You want to enroll in income contingent repayment, which remember is a type of IDR plan, and make at least one payment before July 1, 2028. And that is because of changes that we're seeing at that time related to repayment plans. So you must apply for ICR and you must make at least one payment on it before July 1, 2028. After one payment on ICR, you can then switch to income-based repayment, which there's a few benefits there with income-based repayment. So, okay, remember, income driven repayment, umbrella term for all these different types of plans. ICR is one type of IDR plan. Income-based repayment, or IBR, is another type. So what we're saying here in terms of you can then switch to IBR, the benefits there is that one, IBR will be barring, that you're not borrowing more after July of this year. Income-based repayment will be available to you. So it'll be sort of outlast this July 1, 2028 deadline. And in addition, it's generally cheaper than ICR. So if your borrower is pursuing forgiveness and you're trying to minimize your monthly payment, that could be really beneficial for you. Okay, top level. Certify as soon as possible. Apply to consolidate by or on April 1, 2026. Following that, enroll in ICR and make at least one payment before July 1, 2028. Okay, so if you're a Parent Plus borrower, you want access to income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness, screenshot the slide, take a picture of it. These are sort of the major milestones that you have ahead. So the one that's most imminent is this April 1 deadline. So you want to certify your employment and you want to think about it consolidation. Now, there are pros and cons to consolidating, which we'll get into in a little bit. But so I want to flag that. After this webinar, do research. You can reach out to us if you have questions. This is a personal decision. And so we just want to empower you with the information we have here today. Okay, let's start with public service loan forgiveness and certifying employment there. I mentioned the PSLF help tool. This is a screenshot of what it looks like. It says log in to start. You'll need to log into studentaid.gov to certify. If you're like, okay, well, what is public service loan forgiveness? I'm not sure if this program is something I want to preserve access to. So here's an overview of what PSLF is and what the qualifications are. The key with PSLF is that it's a forgiveness program that the remainder of your loan balance is forgiven after these elements here. So it's after you make 120 monthly payments, it's 10 years of payments, on a qualifying repayment plan. Generally, that's income-driven repayment. On direct loans from the Department of Education, while working at least 30 hours a week on average at a qualifying employer. So that's government or a 501c3. So that's sort of the first step with certifying PSLF and getting an understanding of the program. Okay, consolidation. Let's dive into consolidation a little bit more given this April 1st deadline. So what is consolidation? Consolidating your loans combines your loans into a new direct consolidation loans. So you're paying off your existing loans and your existing Parent Plus loans, and then you have this new loan. Any consolidation loans containing a Parent PLUS loan must be issued before July 1 of this year to be eligible for any income-driven repayment plan. Again, because of the processing times for consolidation loans, consolidation disbursement taking 4 to 6 weeks, that's why this April 1st deadline is recommended to take action. We talked a little bit that there's pros and cons to consolidating, and that's why if you're a borrower who is, on these fixed repayment plans, you're not worried about IDR, you're not PSLF, it's important to consider all the information here. No matter what borrower you are, you should, after we get off this call, do more research into consolidation. These are the top level things to note with consolidation. One is related to interest rates. So direct consolidation loans have a fixed interest rate. So the way your interest rate is calculated is that it's a weighted average of the loans you're consolidating, rounded to the nearest 1/8. What a weighted average is it's an average that gives higher weight to any loans that you have with a higher debt balance. So if you have questions about that, definitely reach out. So one thing to note is you might pay more in interest over time. Also, when you consolidate your loans, the interest capitalizes, which means that any accrued interest is added to the outstanding principal balance. So in other words, you might be paying more in interest over time. So that's something to think about as well. Another important element is related to default. So consolidation is one avenue of getting out of default, which is 9 months of non-payment on your student loans. So when you consolidate, this might limit your options to consolidate to get out of default in the future. So this could have implications down the line if you are facing a situation where you're unable or don't pay student loans for a period of 9 months. Public service loan forgiveness. Why did we recommend certifying your employment as the first step here? The reason for that is in this slide next to PSLF. So when you consolidate your loans with different repayment histories, what they're going to do is they're taking a weighted average of the counts on your loans when you consolidate. And so why it's important to certify your employment first and catch up all your PSLF counts to as high as you can get them by certifying, or I should say as current as they are, is because you want to make sure before you consolidate that you're capturing a higher PSLF count. You don't want to leave anything on the table here, essentially. And so that's why we're recommending to people that you certify employment first and foremost. It's because of this weighted average of your PSLF counts. One really important thing to note as well is that consolidating loans now is likely to result in losing any time you have earned towards income-driven repayment, forgiveness, and cancellation. So if you're a borrower who's not pursuing PSLF and you are pursuing IDR, that counter resetting to 0 would be something to think about. So I just wanted to note that for folks. How do you consolidate? So again, you never have to pay. You can do it online. You'll note that this looks really similar to the page with PSLF certification. So if you go to studentaid.gov/loan-consolidation, that's how you can consolidate. Okay, so we covered certifying your public service loan forgiveness and talked a little bit more about why we recommend doing that and preserving some of your PSLF progress. We talked about what consolidation is, pros and cons of consolidating, the things you might want to think about related to interest, default, what it means for your PSLF progress, what it means for your income-driven repayment forgiveness progress. Now we're going to talk about enrollment and payment and income contingent repayment, which is that IDR plan we talked about. Okay, so the deadline here is July 1, 2028, so 2 years down the line. Consolidation is much sooner. That is April 1 of this year. You have a bit more time in terms of enrolling and having one payment on income contingent repayment. So as we talked about, ICR and IBR are both repayment plans that tie your payment to income and offer forgiveness after 20 or 25 years. After consolidating, you will likely only be eligible for income contingent repayment. And so what you'll want to do is make at least one full payment on ICR, and then that will unlock income-based repayment or IBR. So you want to do this before July 1, 2028. So if you haven't already enrolled a consolidation loan in an IDR plan, then you must enroll an ICR before July 1, which we covered. If you have a FFEL consolidation loan, then you will likely need to apply to consolidate into a direct loan to enroll in IDR. And this is also important for public service loan forgiveness as well. Okay, quick caveat. I think we had someone ask about this in the chat. So let's say that you are borrowing more or you consolidate after July 1 of this year. Note that this is 2026, this year. Any Parent Plus loan or consolidation loan with Parent Plus will be locked out of IDR. If you take out any federal loans, if you borrow at all after July 1, 2026, all Parent Plus loans, including those that were consolidated. So let's say you consolidate now and it's dispersed before July 1. But let's say you have to borrow more after July 1. Even still, that means you'll be ineligible for an income-driven plan or IDR plans. So instead, these loans will only have access to payment plans that tie the amount you pay to your overall debt balance. And you won't have access to repayment plans that tie your monthly repayment to your income. And in most cases, this will prevent these loans from accessing public service loan forgiveness. So this is really important. And so we understand this is really stressful in terms of what borrowing in the future might look like. So if you are, you're on this webinar and you're like, wow, like I think I have to borrow after July 1. What does that mean for me? We can have a conversation about what that means. And it's something to really think about in terms of borrowing in the future and what that might mean for your available repayment and forgiveness avenues. Okay, so just to put a fine point on it with public service loan forgiveness, so what does this mean if you're pursuing PSLF and you have Parent Plus loans? So for PSLF, we talked about how important it is to be on a qualifying plan while making those 120 payments. That includes income-driven repayment plans. It also includes a standard 10-year plan based on your debt size. We wanted to sort of note that so folks are aware. If you have questions about that, let us know. But generally, we recommend to people to be enrolled in income-driven repayment. And so you likely need to take the steps we talked about today in terms of certifying your employment, consolidating on April 1st, and then enrolling an ICR by July 1, 2028, and making at least one payment to preserve public service loan forgiveness. Okay, rights and protections. So as a district resident, you have rights and protections afforded to you under the District Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights. There are many protections that are afforded to you. If you have questions about that, Lindsay and I are happy to chat. But as it relates to some of the topics we covered today, we want folks to know that you're entitled to timely, accurate, and complete information about your loans, accessible and fair customer service, timely and accurate consolidation processing. So if you're concerned after your consolidation loan is dispersed about, okay, were all the loans that I indicated wrapped up in the consolidation loan, or was my weighted average of my PSLF counts calculated correctly? If you're worried about that, you can definitely reach out to us. And in addition, correct credit reporting. Okay, that was a lot and felt really acronym heavy today. So happy to answer questions. We also have contacts for our office, OAG's office. So if you have complaints, further questions, if you want to figure out about how some of this applies to your circumstance and what avenues are available, we're happy to chat. So please know we're here for you. And with that, I think we can turn to questions. Okay, so Lindsay, do you want to read out the questions?
Sure. So I think you answered this one, these already. But what are the options for parents who child is still in school and will likely need to take out more loans?
Yeah, so sh and I see, should we consolidate? So the thing to note is that if you are borrowing, and I put the slide back up for those that are borrowing more consolidating after July 1, if they're Parent Plus loans and you borrow after this date, they'll be ineligible for income driven repayment based on guidance we're receiving now. That's the other thing I want to note too, that this webinar is all this information is current as of this date. So I think we can have a conversation about your specific circumstance and what that looks like. But in terms of like generally for folks who are borrowing more, any federal loans after July 1, 2026, your repayment options will look different. And Parent Plus loans, including those that were consolidated right now, will be ineligible for income-driven repayment. And that these fixed repayment plans will be the only repayment option moving forward.
And Jesse, people want to talk to you about their specific situation. How can they reach you?
Yeah, a great question. And please definitely reach out because I know consolidation is, there's a lot to think about here and we covered a lot. So you can call us at the number on the left here, email us at dcloanhelp@dc.gov and talk a little bit more, what borrowing will look like for you in the future and what your options are that are available to you. Because I want to flag too that our conversation today was focused on federal loans. So if you're a borrower with private loans, income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness, those are federal programs. So I want to note that as well. But that's how you can reach out to us.
And I think this is sort of a still along the same lines as the prior questions, but does PSLF, will that exist for parents that are still borrowing?
So the 10-year, it's a tricky question. For the generally, I want to say no with an asterisk because of this. If you borrow after July 1, 2026, consolidated Parent Plus loans will be locked out. Now, you'll have access to the standard plan. And as we talked about, there's a certain debt balance you might have that might make that, I think it's 7,500. I'm worried about the amount and I don't want to speak to it. So generally, I'm going to say no because of this lockout of income driven repayment. That said, it's worth a conversation of what your debt size is and what your borrowing will look like in the future to figure out in terms of like the standard eligibility if that is a path forward for you. Did that make sense? Sorry,
I think
that
what you're
felt,
saying is that under the standard plan, that may be a qualifying plan in the future.
yeah, depending on their debt size. So generally, Ashley, no, and that's something that will be, I'd say generally no for those borrowing after July 1, 2026. And because of that, you then might want to think about how you might borrow in the future. And I'm happy to have a conversation with this person about what that might look like.
Okay. And I do want to say, Dolores, your question is pretty specific and might make sense for you to directly reach out to Jesse.
Yeah, feel free to email us at DC Loan Help and we can chat. Do folks have other questions?
We'll give people another minute since I see some typing. Good question. Will the recording be shared with everyone? So I believe our intent is to eventually post the information section of the recording on both OAG and DISB's websites. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
A question about borrower defense could be related.
Yeah. So, what is borrower defense? This is a great question. So, borrower defense is also related to federal loans. If you are a student who is concerned, or excuse me, if you have loans for an institution where you're concerned that you were misled or defrauded by, borrower defense is a program with the Department of Education where you it's essentially a loan discharge program where you're asking them to review your specific circumstances related to misleading acts or misrepresentations by your school, and as a result you're looking to have your loans discharged. That is administered by the Department of Education. We are happy to walk folks through what applying looks like. Folks can apply for free. So I hope that was a good overview. And sorry if that was not I'm sure there's an attorney that I got like a word or something is maybe not quite right, but that's the gist of it. And so if you're a borrower who's concerned about having been misled or defrauded, then this is a program you want to explore related to loan discharge. So that's a
And
good question too. Oh, go ahead, Lindsay.
I was going to say, does borrower defense apply to Parent Plus loans as well?
That's a great question that I don't have an
So
answer to.
it should be in
I
your
believe,
underlying loan paperwork. And so if you do have a question of whether your loan qualifies or has that borrower defense clause, feel free to reach out to either Jesse or I.
yeah. Oh, and that's another, I think, just thread too, is like there are other discharge programs available. So that was great. Borrower defense is one in terms of if you're concerned about misleading or misleading practices. Closed school discharge, total and permanent disability discharge, or TPD. So I just want to flag these other discharge programs for folks as well.
Okay. We have a few more minutes, so if you have any outstanding questions, put them in the chat now. Otherwise, you can always follow up with Jesse or myself.
I'm just going to put in the chat. Here's a helpful link that has some more information on different forgiveness programs, including borrower defense, including total and permanent disability. So definitely explore those as well. Yay! Oh, thanks. I'm glad they're helpful. I know it's a lot, so as you have questions or the applicability, definitely reach out, but appreciate it.
Sure, I'll put our names and the way you can contact us in the chat.
Also, I see someone submitted a Q&A question, so I'll answer that. Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions, chat.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And yeah, please follow up if you have any specific questions about your loans. And join us for our webinar next week on changes to the public service loan forgiveness program. All right. Thank you.
Yay. Thanks, everyone.